Hello, and welcome to Atlassian Remote Summit 2020. My name is Mike Tria, and I'm the head of platform at Atlassian. Are you a developer at a big company? Are you a manager that doesn't know how to balance how much innovation you want your teams to do? Do you want them to just do the work on the backlog? How do you find time for them to innovate? I'd like to dispel some myths about teamwork and innovation at big companies. You don't always need to follow the rules to get things done, and big ideas often come from the most unlikely of places. I'd like to tell you two stories. Let's jump right in. The year was 2017. I'd like to talk about a problem that a lot of companies face as they grow: where to host data. So the graph you can see here is a map of the world, and the two orange boxes show where we were hosting our data. These were in physical data centers in West and East. We were on a massive project called Vertigo. That project was to take Atlassian's cloud infrastructure, where we were hosting Jira and Confluence, and move them into the cloud, into AWS. We had customers all over the world, but we were hosting all of their data in the United States. Customers in Europe faced slow speeds. And it was slow because data was making its way all around the world. It had to transit from Europe, Asia, APAC, all the way to those data centers in the US. And as we know, the speed of light is pretty darn slow. Eventually, we knew we wanted to open a data center in Europe running on Amazon. It was never quite the right time. The expression was, it was always on the backlog. It was far out on the horizon, and we were working on a migration to AWS. But there was one person that wasn't quite happy with that answer. He said that we probably could, even during the middle of the migration, spin up a region in Europe, in Ireland specifically, and start serving new customers there. Sure, maybe we couldn't migrate existing customers yet because we were still in the middle of the migration, but what if we just started to host new users there? Well, the problem was that would take a decent sized team to do. It would take a few people. And we had timing constraints. We were in the middle of doing a migration. It was always on the backlog. But this engineer had a passion. And he approached me and he approached a few others and said, hey, I'd love to do this, and suggested using ShipIt. For those of you that don't know, Atlassian, about 4 times a year, does a global hackathon. And in it, we have about a day and a half or so where we let people work on whatever they want to do as long as they ship it and provide value to customers. So this engineer did something pretty unique. They assembled a lot of people into one team. We had, at my count, about 40 people on what is the largest ShipIt team in Atlassian's history. We had people from the networking team, Jira, our infrastructure organization, SREs. It was massive. It was all mostly located in Sydney, Australia, and it was mostly full of seniors. This was not a balanced team. I would say in about 36 hours, they did a lot with relatively few people. Bunch of senior engineers working under very tight timelines, all working in one location together to solve a problem. In about 36 hours, they were proven correct. They were able to provision a customer in Ireland as a proof of concept. And this was greeted to much fanfare as we do what is essentially a ShipIt celebration and presentation to the company, where both our co-founders, Mike and Scott, saw it and awarded it basically the #1 prize for being able to pull this off. The initial setup was great. It significantly improved the latency issues in Europe, but this team knew that we would face this issue again and again, as we have customers, again, in other parts of the world, other than just the United States and Europe. So they also did, during that same ShipIt, a proof of concept in Singapore, showing that the solution they put forward was repeatable and scalable across regions. Again, all of this done in 36 hours, just crazy. This significantly improved latency throughout Asia as well. And in fact, coming up, we had our first European summit. So this was now the spring of 2017. This is April and May. And this was the first time Atlassian was hosting our summit, our customer conference in Europe, in Barcelona. And this ShipIt project went so well that we decided to fund it, and it became the headline in the keynote from Scott Farquhar to our customers. There was no top-down planning for this. I would say there was very little planning at all to get it done. It was incredibly value, and a huge percentage of our customers are now running there based on the ship it that this team did. Very, very successful. I think what you need is sometimes the right leader. The person that's driving innovation needs to have drive and passion. I've been in a few situations where if you try to tap somebody and you tell them, hey, go innovate on this, go innovate on that, you're probably not going to get the outcome you're looking for. The person is probably in your company right now that has that drive and passion. Find out who they are and enable them. Secondly, each person needs to bring something unique to the spike. And when I say spike, I mean any sort of short constrained project that drives some kind of innovation in a big bet. For this particular ship it, we had a lot of people, 48 to be exact, but as I told you, their skill sets were pretty unique across the set. We had people from networking, databases, our platform as a service, CI/CD, SREs, all over the place. Each person needs to bring unique talent because in the story I'm about to tell you, you need to make sure that the team is small. And then lastly, optimizing for cohesion. This team was all on site in one location, working against one specific goal. Each person had a set of tasks they were doing and they went for it. I would say you can get 48 people together for about 2 days with not much prior notice, but after about a week, things will start to fall apart simply because you start to need project tracking and you start to need some more process and rituals. 2 days, you can do most things. So optimizing for that kind of cohesion for your team. Now the next innovation, that came from a very different place. Here's the situation. Atlassian in the year 2014, let's go back in time again. We introduced our cloud ecosystem framework and we called it Atlassian Connect. The way it works is if you have one of our products, Jira, Confluence, and Bitbucket at the time, and you want to do some form of extensibility, you want an add-on, you want an app to run on that system, what you need to do is you need to spin up your own servers in a cloud provider, AWS, GCP, Azure, etc. You host all the code, you host all the data, and then we provide a series of APIs and extension points for us to call your system. And it's all iframe based, and it actually had some pretty high barriers for innovating, specifically for third-party developers. Atlassian, as you know, has 2 deployment options for our products. One is hosted on-premise. These are our server and data center products. And then we have our cloud products, where Atlassian does all the hosting for you. In our server and data center products, the kind of extensions that you can do are really, really rich. You have a server where you can essentially just write Java code and plop it onto that server, and that code's going to run and let you do whatever you want, change classes, do anything. With Connect, since we're controlling a set of APIs, and they're, let's say, a little bit more strict than what we did on server, you don't get that kind of extensibility. And we saw that when we looked through our cloud apps. We saw that they simply weren't as rich as the ones on server and data center. And our vendors, the people that are writing these apps, are telling us this too. For years, we struggled with how to overcome this. How do we move past this API-based approach for building third-party apps? So I took this team on in about 2018, started working with our ecosystem team. And I was trying to understand why we had so many people with such raw talent and understanding of the space. Many people on the ecosystem team had been there for years. And yet when we looked at what was out there for our vendors were complaining. And really what it came down to is we were doing something I like to call Hillclimbing. We were just taking the next story off the backlog and delivering the next incremental feature. But what wasn't happening is we weren't taking the leap to a new type of way of solving the problem. All of the strategy and thinking, even at that time, was all top down. It was all from our executive team or from the director level all the way down to that team. And the team didn't really feel very empowered to solve their own problem. And yet, if you sit and you talk to developers, they're using other companies' ecosystem frameworks and really enjoying them. Well, why couldn't we have the developers on our own ecosystem team in the driver's seat? So we did something called a spike. We lovingly called it the ecosystem spike or eco spike. So instead of a process to present a product roadmap and approval and funding and budgets and architecture, I said, I need one person, I need a leader and 5 other people and 3 months, and let's see what they can do. Simple as that. We had a person who had a real passion for the space. Again, similar to our first story, having a leader with drive and passion is very important. I told them I would protect your time. You have to build something awesome. There would be no ideas coming from executives. The only thing we'll tell you is what the problem is. Here's the problem. And then what I want you to do is build the system that you want to use. You've got 3 months. The leader had both skills and tenure. They handpicked their team from across Atlassian. We brought in people from the Trello team, from Bitbucket. We flew everyone to Sydney. We got the budget, and we gave them the problems that the dev face. That's it. No OKRs, no tickets. At the end, they had to do a demo to our co-founders. That's it. Just dream, prove a system. It was hard. This team worked for 12 to 14-hour days. They formed a team, and they built a demo at the time that was called Zen that we later named Forge. Forge is Atlassian hosted compute. We got rid of iframes, better for UI, even has Bitbucket pipelines-based DevOps toolchains. How the heck did we come up with all this stuff? Well, we had developers that decided to build a system that they would want to use. At about 2.5 months in, we did that demo. We actually were doing demos around the company. In fact, every week what this team did is on Friday, they would basically just live stream what they were working on and show demos, and lots of people within Atlassian started to tune into it. It became a bit of a cultural phenomenon within the company. When they finally went and presented to our executive team, one exec said, "You really set a high bar for a spike," and this was directly to the team. I told the team that if your spike goes well, we'll fund it, we'll commit to it, and if it's the right thing to do, it became Forge. And today, we now have over 1,000 signups for our closed beta, and we can barely handle the demand. Again, all of this came from simply allowing the team to build the system that they wanted to build. So for this form of innovation as a manager, the big thing I would say is it's important to let go. If you constrain the problem space, you can unleash the solution space. Tell the team the problem and then give them some constraints. You cannot have a giant team. If we went for, let's say, 30 people on this spike, we would have had a very huge complex system. We would have had to have done with project rituals and so forth. It would have been too much. And if we gave them a year, well, again, we would have spent too long over-optimizing for probably not the core problem, which was the way that you do extensibility in cloud. 3 months and 6 people, if they're the right people, you can prove just about anything. So across these 2 stories, I have what I think are conditions for success for innovating at a big company. First of all, the team needs to be small. Time needs to be short. If it runs too long, then the team starts to fall apart. There's going to be blind spots, personality issues. You can't do a spike for a year. I would say even your small team does not need to be balanced. That's okay. It can have a whole bunch of seniors or principals on the team. That's fine. You're not optimizing for a long-term team here. You're optimizing for people to prove something. Secondly, I cannot stress this enough. Constraints, constraints, constraints. Constrain the problem, constrain the scenario, but let them build whatever they want. You can't do a little of this and a little of that. You have to be super focused and give them an avenue to prove what they want to prove. And then lastly, as a manager, your job is to protect them from the company. The goal is not to enable them via the company. I've heard lots of stories from people that say they work at a startup in a big company and they get the best of both worlds. I would say that I've rarely seen that work. Where I truly see things work is when you truly isolate someone from the larger business. Because in the larger business, they're going to ask questions, as they must, around budgets, constraints, headcount that's needed for a problem, using the same status reporting system across the business. All of these things for an innovation, for a small spike, are only going to slow them down. Put guardrails on the company, not on the spike team. And as a manager, this is terrifying. Because if it fails, you're ultimately accountable as a leader. You're the one that said it's okay to break the rules, so it's on you. If you believe in your team, though, this is the kind of innovation that you can get, the 2 examples that I showed you before. And you set a great example as a leader, and other people will want to be part of that kind of innovative culture. I would say broadly as a manager, if you're not uncomfortable, then you haven't pushed far enough. If you're extremely uncomfortable, you may have pushed too far. But I'd say the right level of knowing if you're innovating appropriately, finding that right balance, is if you're a bit uncomfortable. If you are, you're probably in the right spot to make big bets for your company. These lessons have sure helped us. I hope they help you on your journey, whether you're a standalone developer on a team that just wants to innovate on something, Or you're a manager and you're confused about how to balance. Here are two examples that you can use that tell you about how Atlassian's done innovation and the outputs that we got out of it. I hope you enjoy the rest of Atlassian Remote Summit 2020, our first all-remote summit. Thank you very much.